The rain hadn't started yet, but the clouds hung heavy with threat, sagging low over the roofs of the dust-caked frontier town like a judgment passed down from heaven. The wind cut sharp, dragging grit across wooden planks where boots shuffled and spurs jangled. People had gathered like they always did when something mean was about to happen, faces hidden beneath brims. Shadows stretched long in the late afternoon light, eyes sharp, voices low. Asterisk on the raised platform in the center of the square stood a man with a long mustache, a rusted revolver on his hip, and a scrap of paper in his hand. His voice cracked through the thick air like a whip. "Lot number 7. One girl, strong-boned. Comes with a suckling infant. 2 for the price of 1, gentlemen." Asterisk, a ripple of sound moved through the crowd. Some chuckled, some spat, others just stared. They weren't there for justice or mercy. They were there for the same reason: vultures. "Circle a carcass." Asterisk, the girl didn't flinch. She was small, no more than 11, but her posture held. Her dress was threadbare, the color long lost to weather and washing, and her arms were thin but steady. In them she held a baby swaddled in a faded blue blanket. He made no noise. His eyes were closed, his face turned inward like he knew not to cry here. Asterisk, the auctioneer continued. "Parents gone perished in the fire at Crowshead Ridge. This one's got no kin and no prospects. Poor house couldn't keep 'em both. Now who's ready to start the bidding?" Asterisk, someone near the front laughed. "Ain't even worth the feed, far as I see it." Asterisk, another voice, slurred and mean, chimed in. "I'll offer a bottle of corn whiskey and a chicken." Girl looks sturdy enough to scrub floors. Asterisk, the girl squeezed the bundle tighter. Her lips moved, though no sound came. A prayer, or maybe a promise. Whatever it was, it didn't stop the next round of laughter. Asterisk, $3. Came a shout from a broad-shouldered man with rotten teeth and a red kerchief around his neck. He leaned forward like he already owned them, his gaze slow and sticky as it passed over her. Asterisk, the auctioneer's eyes lit up. "Now that's a proper bid. Do I hear 4? Asterisk, a hush came over the crowd, not because they were surprised by the price, but because something had shifted in the wind. Asterisk, the girl looked down at the baby. His name was Thomas. Just a few months old. He'd started teething, and sometimes at night he whimpered so quietly she wasn't sure if it was from hunger or dreams. Their mother used to sing to him, but her voice had gone silent with the fire. Their father's hands had been calloused and gentle until the fever took him weeks. Before Asterisk, she had only her hands now. And her word, she had promised him she would protect him. But here, in this place, her word meant nothing. Asterisk, the auctioneer raised his voice. "Last call, gentlemen." "Going once," a boot step echoed. "Going twice." Asterisk, another step, deliberate and slow, heads turned. The crowd parted without anyone asking them to. The man who walked forward moved with a limp, each footfall thudding with a patient certainty that said he was not there to speak. He was there to decide. Asterisk, he was tall, broad. In the shoulders, his long coat dusted with road and blood. Not fresh blood, but the kind that stains over years and becomes part of a man's leather. His hat shaded most of his face, but the jaw beneath was made of iron and silence. A scar rode the left side of his neck like a claw mark from another. "Life." Asterisk, he stepped to the edge of the platform. The auctioneer swallowed and cleared his throat. Asterisk, "Can I help you, sir?" Asterisk, the man didn't answer. He unbuckled a pouch from his belt and tossed it onto the wooden crate beside the girl. The sound it made when it landed wasn't coin. It was heavier. R-A-W-E-R, asterisk. The auctioneer's brow wrinkled. "Is that asterisk gold dust?" the man said, voice low and rasped from years of smoke and silence. "More than she's worth. More than any of you are." Asterisk, the crowd stiffened. Whispers darted like mice between boots. Asterisk, "She's got a brother," the auctioneer said. "They come together?" Asterisk, the man didn't look at the baby. He looked at the girl. Her eyes, pale green and sharp, didn't flinch from his. They were wild, like an animal with one paw in a trap. "Then I take both," he said. Someone near the back scoffed. "That's Silas Ridd," they whispered. "Used to be 9th Cavalry. Lost his wife birthing a stillborn. Buried him both." Ain't been right since. Asterisk, the auctioneer hesitated. It's not usually done like this. There's a process. Asterisk, Silas turned his head slow and cold, then change it. Asterisk, the pouch was enough to buy a wagon and 2 mules. Enough to keep a man fed for half a year if he was smart. The auctioneer thought about arguing, but the man's eyes gray as slate and twice as unforgiving made his mouth go dry. Asterisk, sold, he said. To Mr. Reed. Asterisk, Callie didn't move at first. She stood rooted like the boards beneath her feet. When Silas extended his hand, she stared at it as if it were a trap. The baby stirred in her arms and gave a soft cry. That's what made her legs move. They stepped off the platform together, and the crowd parted again, some out of awe, others out of fear. Silas didn't look at anyone. He simply guided the girl toward his wagon, the sky above them brooding with unshed rain. They rode in silence. The wagon was old, but sturdy. Wood groaned under each bounce, and the wheels left deep ruts in the dirt. Callie sat near the edge, her knees tucked up, Thomas in her lap. Silas held the reins loosely, eyes on the horizon. Asterisk, she didn't ask where they were going. She knew that anywhere was better than where she'd been. Asterisk, after an hour, she broke the silence. Why'd you do it? Asterisk, Silas didn't look at her. Didn't? Like the way they looked at you. Asterisk, she didn't answer. But her hands shifted just slightly, easing the blanket tighter around her brother's face. Asterisk, the road stretched on. Miles of wheatgrass, scrub, and dying fence posts. Here and there, blackened tree trunks clawed at the sky like broken fingers. Asterisk, she spoke again, softer this time. You ever raised a baby? He nodded once. What happened? Asterisk, he paused. Didn't get to keep him. Asterisk, that was all he said. And it was enough. Asterisk, by the time the sun dipped below the hills, they reached his land. A small ranch house squatted in the middle of nothing, timbers silvered from wind. A smokehouse half collapsed, a barn with one door hanging on by rusted hinges. The place smelled of pine tar and loneliness. Asterisk, he led them inside. The girl hesitated on the threshold. She expected shackles. Or shouting. Or the kind of silence that felt like waiting, asterisk, but instead there was just space, a cot made up with clean sheets. A cracked mirror nailed to the wall. A kettle steaming on a stove, asterisk, she placed the baby down on the cot and hovered beside him, unsure what to do with her own limbs. Silas poured water into a bowl, set it beside her, and pulled a tin of ground herbs from a shelf. Asterisk. He's been fussing, she murmured. I think it's his stomach, asterisk, Silas nodded. Chamomile? Good. For colic. Asterisk, you got any kids here now? No. Anyone else? Asterisk, no. Asterisk, she sat beside her brother and watched as Silas returned to the fire. She wanted to ask him what he wanted from her. Why he really did it. But she was too tired to hear a lie. Asterisk, she pulled the locket from her dress and opened it. Inside was a sketch her father, drawn in pencil, smiling in a way she could barely remember. She showed it to the baby, who blinked at it and drooled. Asterisk, that night, the rain finally came. It pounded the roof in thick, angry waves. The girl curled around Thomas, her arms forming a makeshift wall. Asterisk, across the hall, Silas stared at the ceiling. The storm sounded like cannon fire, and in the cracks between thunder, he heard a baby's cry from years ago. A scream. Then silence. Asterisk, he covered his eyes with a calloused hand and tried not to remember the weight of 2 graves, side by side, under a cottonwood tree. Asterisk, the wind howled. The past whispered, but in the other room there was breath steady and alive. And that for now would have to be enough. Asterisk. The morning came without fanfare, the prairie washed in a damp gray light that made everything seem quieter than it ought to be. Callie stepped outside barefoot, her toes curling into the dew-slicked dirt as she gazed across the open land. Mist clung to the grass, thin as breath, and the house behind her stood solemn and still, a watchtower made of splinters and sorrow. Thomas stirred in the sling across her chest, a soft gurgle of contentment muffled against her shoulder. Asterisk inside, Silas was already moving. He didn't speak when she passed him by in the kitchen, only nodded once, a gesture that meant as much as a sentence between them now. She responded with a glance, her eyes less guarded than they'd been, her shoulders straighter. The silence between them no longer carried the weight of fear, only caution. Worn like old boots, by the third week, the rhythm of the place had settled into her bones. She fed the hens, checked the trap lines, learned how to mend fence wire without slicing her fingers raw. Silas watched her from the porch, sometimes not because he didn't trust her, but because there was something about the way she moved, shoulders tense, eyes always scanning the horizon, that reminded him too much of himself after the war. Always expecting something to come out of the trees. He didn't ask her questions. Not about what came before the poorhouse. Not about the fire or the screams or the men with cruel hands and colder hearts. He figured she'd speak when it stopped hurting, or maybe she never would. Either way, he'd learned that some ghosts weren't meant to be buried, only walked beside. Callie, for her part, began to watch him too. He moved like a man used to being alone, but not necessarily liking it. She noticed the way he paused outside the nursery door each night, lingering, before stepping back into his own space. She noticed how his hands, rough and scarred, turned gentle when they handled a pot of stew or checked the baby's pulse during a fit of coughing. Then came the day the piece cracked. It was near dusk when the riders came. 2 men, dressed in dust and arrogance, pulling up beside the front gate as if they'd arrived to collect a debt. Silas emerged from the barn, shotgun slung casually over one shoulder. Eyes hard. The man in front was thick through the middle, with a tobacco-stained beard and boots polished past frontier vanity. His badge glinted in the dying sun. Marshal Halle, the man said, tipping his hat with no warmth. And this here's Mr. Elias Dobb, come on account of a claim. Silas didn't blink. That right? Elias stepped forward, long-limbed and wiry, with the look of a man who liked breaking things slowly. His grin spread wide, but his eyes stayed empty. Bought that girl proper 3 weeks back. Poorhouse auction, got papers. Callie had stepped out onto the porch, baby on her hip, eyes narrowing when she saw the man. She recognized him instantly. He was the one who had laughed loudest. The one who'd offered whiskey and a chicken. She ain't property, Silas said. She was abandoned. I took her in. Doesn't matter. Transaction was made legal. Auctioneers got the record. You weren't the highest bidder. The auctioneer changed his mind. Said your payment wasn't lawful currency. Said it was dust, not coin. Silas's jaw tightened. The law, he knew, was like a crooked fence bent to suit whoever hammered the nails. He shifted the shotgun forward a notch. She's not going anywhere, he said. Halle lifted a hand. Now, nobody's looking to spill blood. We're just here to give you fair warning. This'll go to the circuit judge. Might not rule in your favor. The riders turned without more words, kicking up dust as they rode back into the flat distance. Callie watched them disappear. Then she looked at Silas. She didn't ask if he was scared. She didn't ask what they would do next. She simply handed him the baby so she could go chop firewood. That night, he sat by the hearth, turning a war medal over and over in his palm. The metal was dull now, its engraving worn smooth by time. He'd once believed it meant something: honor, sacrifice, service. Now it felt like a paperweight for guilt. He opened a drawer in the bureau and took out a folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased. His wife's last letter. Her handwriting soft and round, written 2 weeks before the labor. She'd written about hope, about what they'd name the boy, about how she couldn't wait to see Silas hold him. He had never held him. The baby was stillborn, his wife bled out, and all that remained was a grave beneath the cottonwood tree behind the barn. He looked across the room. Callie was whispering to Thomas, her voice low and steady as she rocked him. She was strong, not just in her bones, but in her will. The kind of strong that came from being let down by everyone and surviving it anyway. He clenched the metal in his hand until it bit into his palm. 2 days passed, then 3. On the 4th morning, the attack came. He was out behind the barn when he heard the first crack of a rifle. The wood beside his head splintered, a shot tearing through the corner post. He dropped low and rolled, shotgun already in hand, eyes scanning the tree line. There were 3 of them, faces wrapped in bandanas, moving fast and quiet. Hired men. They weren't there for justice. They were there to take what Elias believed was his. Inside the house, Callie heard the shots and ran. She didn't scream. She grabbed the baby, a knife from the table, and darted out the back door. Her feet pounded the ground as she sprinted for the cornfield, heart slamming against her ribs. She didn't look back. Silas fired once, hitting one of the riders square in the chest. He dropped, twitched, then went still. The others flanked him, bullets tearing through air. One clipped Silas's shoulder, spinning him backward against the wall. He grunted, pain blooming hot and immediate. Bleeding, he pushed forward anyway. The man was built for war. He'd survived worse than this. In the cornfield, Callie crouched low, trying to muffle Thomas's soft whimpers. She held him close, every muscle in her body locked tight, the knife clenched white in her hand. One of the attackers crashed through the stalks behind her. She turned, thrust the blade, missed, scrambled back, but before the man could grab her, a shovel struck his head with a sickening crack. He dropped like a sack of flour. Silas stood over him, blood dripping from his left arm, chest heaving. He pulled Callie to her feet, checking her and the baby with a glance. She didn't cry. She just stared at him like she was waiting to know if it was over, but it wasn't. Elias emerged from the side of the house, revolver aimed steady. You think you're a hero, Reed? He snarled. You think a sack of dust and a bleeding conscience makes you a father? Silas stepped in front of the children, shotgun raised but trembling. Elias grinned, cocked the hammer. She ain't your blood. No, Silas growled. She's mine now, The shotgun blast echoed across the fields. Elias dropped, the revolver tumbling from his fingers. It was over. Later the sheriff came. Not Marshal Hale, someone new, someone local, someone with less pride and more tired eyes. After looking at the bodies and hearing the girl's testimony, he made no arrest. Looks like self-defense, he said. Same way it always does out here. The judge's ruling came 2 weeks later. A courier delivered the parchment, sealed and signed by way of guardianship with intent to adopt, the child known as Callie Jang Marrow and her sibling Thomas are now under lawful custody and protection of Mr. Silas Reed. Callie didn't cry when she heard it. She just stood still for a long moment, her hands twitching at her sides. Then she nodded once and went to feed the hens. The days that followed were not easy, but they were theirs. Silas built a cradle from old oak. He taught Callie to shoot a rifle, to ride a horse bareback, to navigate by stars. She taught him how to listen without needing to fix everything. They spoke little, but the silences grew warmer. One day, as she walked past the porch where he sat whittling, she said it, not loud, not soft, just like it had always been true. Pa? He looked up, his mouth opened. But there was nothing to say. The sun dipped low again, same as it always had, but that evening it shone softer, warmer, as if even the sky understood what had been restored. They sat together as night approached. A girl, a baby, and a man who'd once buried hope but found it again in the arms of those who needed him most.